how much longer can the housing market continue to grow? Transactions in March were the highest in over 15 years, but some experts are now worried that the boom could lead to a bust. Is this a bubble? Is it about to burst? Well, Richard Murphy, an expert in tax, accounting and political economy, is with us, Director of Tax Research UK. Morning to you, Richard.
Morning, Stephen.
Good morning, good morning. And Jonathan Davis, economist, podcaster of the Booms and Busts podcast, a wealth advisor with us, Jonathan. Good morning to you.
Hello again, Stephen.
Good morning. Now, I remember you, and you've given me a hard time about it on a number of occasions. I remember you were on the Nolan Show for many years before the 2008 bust, predicting a bust. And many of my callers were suggesting that you'd lost the plot. So what is your prediction this time, as we've seen house prices continue to go up during this stamp duty holiday?
In fact, I was kindly invited onto your show for about a year before the Northern Ireland housing bust, 2007, saying there's going to be a bust. And then 2008, 2009, 10, 11, 12, there was a massive 54% bust in Northern Ireland. Where are we now? We've got governments all over the world, and particularly this government and the Bank of England, printing money with abandon and just handing it to anyone they feel like. This is hugely inflationary, and you watch the general inflation stats in just a few months' time start to go straight up, and this will reflect in wages and earnings, and yet they will not raise interest rates, even though inflation is going to soar, and soar for many years into the 2030s, is my analysis. The cost of living, the cost of doing business is going to soar. Inequality is going to get even worse, and house prices are going to rise for years, and I would say reasonably at something like 5 to 10% a year.
So you're not predicting another bust. You're saying house prices will continue to go up.
I am saying exactly that. That's my analysis.
Richard?
I'm always amused to be on with Jonathan because he gets just about everything that he says wrong, which is quite fun, really. And look, what he just said is completely, absolutely wrong. Of course the government has created more money. It had to create more money because the commercial banks in the UK were not creating more money, and that's because people were not borrowing money. And that's how all money is created in the UK. And so the simple reason why the government had to step in was because otherwise there would have been no cash in the economy. They haven't been handing it out to anybody who asked for it. They've actually been using it to support jobs and employment to make sure we get through the COVID crisis. So that complete nonsense Jonathan just said is absolutely absurd. Now, of course, there are mistakes that have been made, but is there going to be inflation as a result of this? No. Why isn't there going to be inflation? Because actually there isn't the demand to create inflation, and there are very large numbers of unemployed people still in the UK. Some of that's hidden by furlough right now, but there are, and there's no pressure for price increases anywhere. So Jonathan's analysis is wrong. Let's look at house prices, though. He's right on one thing, and that's this. When the government runs a deficit, it injects money into the private sector. Quite simply, government deficits are phenomenally good for private wealth because the two must balance. That's what happens. And so, every pound that the government runs a deficit of means that there's an increase of equal and opposite value in the wealth of the private sector. And unfortunately, and here Jonathan is right, so I'm acknowledging where he is, while saying he's wrong on most, that goes upwards. Wealth always does, and the wealthy have got wealthier during this. So inequality has risen. And we've seen
about house prices.
And so with that, the result of inequality rising is that those with wealth have been willing to pay more to get hold of houses, very often to get out of cities, and that's reflected in Northern Ireland. It's reflected across the UK. We've seen house prices go up. Will that continue? No. Why won't it continue? Firstly, because the deficits won't continue. They will fall. They won't disappear, but they will fall. The government will not inject as much money. And some of that money that's been saved will be spent. But also, we're not going to see a boom. I'm afraid to say there is no boom in prospect. And the reason why there's no boom in prospect is that COVID has not gone away. Therefore, there's no chance of a significant house price increase. Indeed, there's a chance of a fall, because when the current euphoria created by the fact we think that this is over is shattered, and I fear it will be, just look at what's happening in India, and then see that that is still possible here, a completely different variant from the one that we've all been vaccinated for, if you're of my age. If that's going to come here, we're going to have another crisis, and house prices are going to fall, not rise.
But Richard, your only problem with that analysis relating house prices to COVID is during COVID up till now, house prices have increased significantly. The Office of National Statistics are suggesting that the UK average house price rose by 8.6% over the year to February.
Yeah, but look, I did explain that, Stephen, but let me go back to it. When the government runs a deficit, and it's run a deficit of over 300 billion in the last year, private wealth goes up. Simple, straightforward, absolutely emphatic, mathematically impossible to argue with equation. That's what happens.
I don't understand any of that, by the way. I don't understand why.
Okay.
I don't understand it. Even the basics of it, I don't understand. Why, if a deficit is going up, to the wealthier get wealthy? What's the link? Explain that.
Quite simply,
Dum-dum like me.
Quite simply, if money has to be injected into the economy, and it is, even if it doesn't go to the wealthiest, and of course not all of it by any means has, people spend the money they get. And as they spend the money they get, actually, what happens is some of it is paid back in tax, and some of it is saved, and some of it is spent on. But the point is that over the last year, we haven't had as much opportunity to spend on as we might have done, and therefore those who are wealthy have simply saved more and more of what they got as a share of this. And actually, because their businesses survived, their businesses have gone up in value as well. So the effective value has been to transfer money from the state to the private sector, and everybody who believes in private wealth will be whooping with joy over the last year because the government has created a lot of private wealth.
Okay,
it's
Jonathan.
that which has created the house price increase. My argument is that that's not going to continue because deficits will be smaller, and because we were believing that this process was temporary with regard to COVID.
So what do you...
I fear we're now believing it isn't temporary.
Let me let Jonathan Davis reply. Okay,
sure.
Jonathan's turn.
Inflation is a global phenomenon. It's not about the United Kingdom.
But it's not anywhere in the world, Jonathan.
Can I please speak? Thank you. Inflation is generated by the printing of money and also the price of what we call commodities, the things that we take out the ground or grow, such as oil and gas, gold, copper, wheat and beef. The money supply, the printing of money across the economically developed countries, according to the OECD, is up 17% year on year. There is 17% more money in the world than there was a year ago. That's the biggest rate of increase in 40 years. Over the last 45 years, we've seen inflation since the 1970s fall until effectively zero in recent years. We are now experiencing high inflation because commodities are soaring. To give you one example, on the global stage, the price of oil per barrel has gone up from $20 a year ago in April to $60 today. 200% rise in the price of oil. It's the biggest input to inflation. So I'm telling you, it's a simple fact that the inflation statistics will reflect that from a few months from now. Wages will rise. We will carry on printing money. But I tell you also, we've already seen it in the European Central Bank, in the Japanese Central Bank. We will see it in the UK and the US Federal Reserve as well. They are already doing a thing called yield curve control, which means that they will not raise interest rates for years. Where you have inflation and wage inflation and rates do not rise, I'm telling you, house prices will rise.
But Jonathan, first of all, there is no evidence around the world that inflation is rising. Not at all. And the reason is very simple. You've got a terribly quaint view of how money is created. You also think it all comes off a printing press.
Yeah,
it isn't. It's electronic.
Oh.
And the reason why governments had to create money in the last year, and I did make this clear, is because banks didn't. Almost all our money used to be created by banks. Banks have not created it. Governments have stepped in to make it the shortfall, and now that will not be the case. So your belief that this is somehow going to create this flood of money is just, and I can only be blunt about this, simply straightforwardly wrong, and listeners should ignore everything Jonathan has said.
Here's Kieran in South Belfast. Morning, Kieran.
Yeah, no, Stephen, it's just with all these comments of all these fake protections that they don't actually know if it's going to happen either way. What's the point of it? If there's no physical data to see what way this is going to go, what is the point of having these fake protections?
Well, what way do you think it's going to go?
Well, that's exactly why I would rather wait. There's some kind of data to let you know what way it's going to go before.
Well, look, here's where it's gone so far, right? So, according to the Nationwide Building Society, Northern Ireland prices grew by 7.4%. So this is for the first part of 2021. The average Northern Ireland house price is 154,000. 7.4% for the first part of 2021. That's a phenomenal increase, Kieran. Now, is that down to stamp duty? Is that down to people in their homes a lot more during COVID and thinking to themselves, if I'm going to be here, I want as nice an environment as I can afford? Like, what is driving this, and is it going to continue to drive?
Well, if you do have two guys on there that are financial advisors...
Well, I don't know about you. Did you understand the word they said? All due respect to them. They're talking about these deficits. It's gobbledygook to me too. All these deficits and inflation around the world and all. I want to know if house prices are going to go up or down.
Exactly. Explain it in a way that everyone else can understand.
But I'll tell you...
Can I answer, Stephen, for you? They're not going to go up because there isn't going to be the stimulus, and Rishi Sunak is going to take away this awful stamp duty boost again as well, which was wholly unnecessary and which has penalised young buyers very badly because they can't access the market because the price has gone up. The benefit of that stamp duty increase went entirely to existing house owners. That's totally unfair. Take that away for a start, and he will, and we will see house prices stabilise as well.
Okay. Final word to you, Jonathan.
House prices are a function of lending and cost of borrowing, in other words, interest rates. We know that the governments will continue to lend with abandon for many years. The furlough scheme for 9 million people is just free money being thrown at people, and the bounce-back loans. The government has basically said that they will allow banks to lend and they will guarantee the lending. I guarantee you that is going to get into mortgages, and I can also tell you they will not raise interest rates. Buy houses, don't worry about it.
But of course the government doesn't raise interest rates. That's the Bank of England, which is
They're both entwined, Stephen. They're both entwined.
Well, they're not. By their very definition, they are independent of each other, aren't they?
Stephen, by definition, actually, Jonathan is right on this one. They're completely one and the same thing. Let's not pretend the Bank of England is independent. It does do exactly what it's told by the government. No, it isn't.
Semantics, Stephen. I'm telling you, in the real world, the Bank of England basically does what the leading politicians want to happen. It happens all around the world.
And on this point, we agree, Stephen. But the consequences, Jonathan has entirely wrong.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard and Jonathan. Thank you.